Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody back, Alabama Care. This morning we have the absolute pleasure of being with Mr. Michael Papp in Homewood. And Mr. Papp is the Program Manager, Rehabilitation Engineering and Assistive Technology Services at ADRS here in Homewood. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over. Mr. Papp, if you would introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Michael. I have a master's degree in rehab engineering, and I've been providing services in the state of Alabama since 1999. I've been running this program for maybe about a decade now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, are you originally from Alabama? No. Okay. Just a second, guys. We are going to reset a wireless mic here. And all I'm going to do is just turn it off and turn it on real quick. Does it seem to be working there?
Yeah, yep, it's going.
Okay, perfect.
So, all right.
Are you originally from Alabama?
So, no, originally I'm from Ohio, and both of the degrees I have in engineering are from Wright State University, which is a big human factors engineering and biomedical engineering research area just outside of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Okay. Now, Air Force Base, is that your family there?
No. That's just the Air Force has kind of spearheaded a lot of the original research into human usability and human factors engineering, which is something I'm interested in, is how people interact with technology, how they can use it, and how we can improve the human-machine interface. And generally speaking, human factors engineering is looking at providing service, how to improve access to technology for everyone. Your 95th percentile, 95% of the population. Of course, our focus is on the more like the 5th percentile people with disabilities. So, but both rehab engineering and human factors are closely related in terms of looking at how people use technology.
Yeah.
I just focus on how people with disabilities are able to use it.
I almost hear a little bit of like anthropology in the background of how humans use tools and how that evolves society over time. But the interacting with the different devices there is really cool to think about.
Yeah. Well, the human factor side is more like how to design technology where you don't hurt yourself or do something silly, like with the Air Force. They were having issues during the World Wars with pilots accidentally dumping fuel instead of putting down the landing gear because of how things were located, or taking too long to locate where something is on a display, or where a control is located. And so they became very interested in the 40s on how to build their technology, happened to be war-based technology, but how to build their technology so that it's more usable for people.
Yeah.
And over the years, it's gotten expanded from military-type technologies into cars and now smartphones, and of course technology for folks with disabilities.
I hear it a lot in like the startup space. If you have an app or a landing page, how do you make that landing page intuitive? And how do you make that piece of equipment intuitive so that you don't have to read the manual?
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're looking at, is how to sometimes modify off-the-shelf technology and make it a lot easier to use or more intuitive, where someone doesn't have to read through a manual every time they need to perform a certain function. Especially if it's something they don't do very often. And you've kind of given it, but if you would give a general overview of REAT, and for anybody watching, we're going to kind of shorten that, Rehabilitation Engineering and Assistive Technology. You can see it on the title at the bottom of the screen, but from here on out we'll probably say REAT. And if you give someone a general overview that's unfamiliar with it. Okay, so our program, we have both rehab engineers and assistive technology specialists located throughout the state. The services provided by both of those professions are related, often overlap, but there are some slight differences. And so our assistive technology specialists work primarily with education-based technologies and ergonomic, off-the-shelf type items, usually software or adaptive keyboards. Things of those lines are what they're focused on. Our rehab engineers also do that, but they also focus on custom design and modification of jobs. We do work with all different parts of the agency. We work with our children's rehab program, our vocational rehabilitation program, and our community support and independent living program. And so each of those programs has slightly different needs. But for example, for the children's program, a rehab engineer might need to modify or customize a mounting device for a child's wheelchair to attach a laptop or communication aid. For our vocational rehab program, the engineer might be designing or modifying a piece of technology related to work so that that person can be able to do a job that they aren't able to do otherwise. And for our independent living program, we do a lot of wheelchair ramp design and bathroom modification, as well as helping people make their kitchens more usable and some of those other things that are related to independent living.
You are kind of setting me up for all my talking points here. I have school, or no, I have for work, for school, and for home and life.
Yes,
so it's
certainly.
Kind of ask about this.
Yeah.
But you've been here with the department since 1999. And are there any changes that you've seen? I feel like, I graduated high school in 2004, and I didn't have a smartphone, I think, until college.
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of differences in technology since then. As program manager, have you seen a lot of changes happen in the last 20 years?
Oh, certainly. And our program has changed drastically. When I started, the staff members who were doing what we're doing now were called rehab technology specialists. They were embedded with vocational rehab. It was not a separate program. They really were just working with the voc rehab.
Yeah.
Occasionally with children's and with independent living. And so that was split out at some point and turned into a separate program that was able to work with all the different programs freely. So we were able to do that. We were able to start bringing on assistive technology specialists to help let the engineers focus more on the engineering side and have AT specialists focus on the assistive technology side. And then of course, like you had noted, like the smartphone, like in 2004, your smartphone, if you had one, would have been a BlackBerry.
Yeah.
That was all that was out. The first iPhone came out in 2005, which of course was not accessible. Anyone who remembers the history, especially for individuals who are blind and visually impaired, there was a big uproar about the inaccessibility in iOS. And so by 2007, I think that became accessible. And it really changed the way people communicate, where a phone is not a phone.
Yeah.
It really became your scheduler. You didn't have to carry a Palm Pilot, around separately, plus all the apps. I got the first one I got was like an iPod Touch 2.
Yep.
When it was the first accessible version, and that's what I purchased to start experimenting with. And since then, that technology has really taken off. So in terms of technology has changed a lot, but also the types of services. The services we're offering now are completely different from what we were doing in 1999.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding, changes to tablet technology and now smart digital assistants. So
it sounds like in '99 you guys are really focused on a core individual to serve or program to help here, and then kind of as you guys went through that and the success of it, everybody was like, well, we could serve a lot more people here.
Yeah.
Why don't we make a separate program and kind of branch out in the number? And then you guys built the department, the program up with having more people on the team there.
Yeah, we've doubled our staff
Yeah.
since 1999. It's still not enough. And of course, there's a lot more demand now that as people realize what technology can do for them, especially with education type technology. So back in '99, there was only a handful of software programs that were available, and they were thousands of dollars. Now, built into iOS, built into Mac OS X, built into Windows, are a lot of features that can help students with disabilities, specifically like learning disabilities and visual disabilities, without having to go out and buy something more expensive. But there are still more advanced programs for individuals who need that type of support, which
Yeah.
is very helpful.
If you could give some specific examples there if somebody watching, like what are some additional programs or what are some things that you were just talking about in education, people with a learning disability being more spatial? Is there anything that jumps out to you there?
Okay, so kind of a graduated way of looking at it is that for someone who has some difficulty with reading, built right into Microsoft Word, there's a speech feature where you can highlight text. We can put a little link on the top of the page, on the top of Word, that they can click on and can just read that text to them.
The whole page?
Well, it will read whatever they would like it to read.
Okay.
If someone needs something that's more advanced, say they need assistance with tracking the words and having multiple, it's called multiple modalities of sensory input. That's the scientific engineering side of things. But there's something like text help read and write, which we might use, that provides more advanced reading and writing tools. But that particular tool is several $100s. And with what is currently available, combining what's built in with Word and then maybe a subscription app like Grammarly, which a lot of people have heard of and have seen advertised. I love it. Myself, I use it. We can get people very close to what some of the advanced stuff has if they don't need the super advanced tools built into it.
Kind of tinkering around there, finding that correct solution.
Yeah.
How do you feel where you can see the words on the screen, but also the computer's reading it to you?
Mm-hmm.
That makes me think of if we take those two senses, so seeing and hearing, would I have a better understanding of the concept behind that? Would anybody have a better understanding if they were able to absorb it through multiple senses? And then if I take that further out, if my chair buzzes in a certain way while I'm reading and hearing something, does that anchor it further into my, at some point are we going to be learning in 5D through all senses? We got to smell something.
Yeah, I don't think so because of the distraction.
Yeah.
And so when we're looking at being able to see and hear at the same time, we're usually looking at a specific disability, a specific learning disability that somebody has that has to do with reading comprehension. And so one of the things that people with learning disabilities may have, sometimes there's an ADHD component, and we don't need to introduce extraneous sensory
Too many
input.
inputs there.
Yeah, so we want to focus on, for reading is reading comprehension, and the two aspects of that primarily are going to be seeing the word and hearing the word, or in the case of Braille, feeling the word and hearing the word. But essentially you've got the print version and then you have the auditory feedback, and for certain learning disabilities that improves comprehension.
When you're going through this, you have to have a very deep understanding of the individual and their challenges in order to build something that's going to help them there. So you have to have both the engineering expertise and the building, but then you also have to know the human side and the psychology side, and so that's quite a bit on the table there for you.
Yes, it's quite a bit. We don't figure out all that stuff by ourselves. And so in the case of someone with a learning disability, a lot of times that person will have had a psychological evaluation or a neuropsychological evaluation or some sort of learning disability evaluation where a evaluator has gone through and identified what their deficits are. And we're interested in knowing what their specific deficits might be so that we can figure out what technology is going to fill that in for them or help fill that in for them.
So finding out like where the spearhead is there and focusing on that at first.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll have a report that comes and says they have dysgraphia and a specific learning disability in these particular areas. And then we'll start looking at, say this, we're talking about a student right now, which is a very specific instance, but we'll look at, okay, so this person has difficulty, they might have auditory comprehension issues where we try to focus on text. They might have text comprehension issues where we focus on the auditory side, because there's three different types of learning. There's visual learning, tactile learning, and auditory learners.
Okay.
So you can learn by seeing, learn by hearing, or learn by doing.
The kinesthetic is what I was thinking there.
Yeah, the kinesthetic, yeah. And so if someone might have a deficit in the auditory side, then we're going to focus on visual. But we
Yeah.
still, that's when we're talking about multiple modalities. We're trying to bring in something that might not be as much of a weakness for them into the learning process to enable them to learn better.
Sometimes I read these books, so, building and success books, and they say focus on your strengths, not your weaknesses. Don't necessarily try and make your weaknesses come up, but focus on your strengths and bring them up a little bit further. And when you go through that, I kind of think about that. If you had 3 bar charts and one was a little bit down, like I struggled with kinesthetic learning, well, let's raise the other 2, and the average of all 3 will still be the same, but kind of tinkering with that formula there.
Yeah, we don't, there's a lot of different teaching theories. I personally don't want to focus or eliminate, like from a learning aspect, if someone has difficulty with visual learning, like reading text, I don't want to eliminate that from that person, because you still need to be able to read. But we don't want, from our aspect, because the engineers and the AT specialists, we work with people throughout their lifespans. And so when someone is in K through 12 schools, they're focused at that point in their life on learning. And if the one thing that we see with older adults that we've worked with who have had gone through school and have had learning disabilities is that if all they do is focus on learning to read in school, they don't pick up the other skills that they need. And so they certainly should work on learning to read in school if they're having some issues with that.
Yeah.
But they also need to have the technology to learn about history, about math, about science, about physics. The other things that really make a difference when someone is trying to get a job. Those sorts of skills, the technical side of things, are very important. And if someone spends their entire life all the way through high school just trying to learn how to read at a second or third grade level, they're going to miss out on very important information that they need to have.
In order to be successful in the work environment.
Yes.
So that brings up a really good point. You don't want to go too far in one direction to almost, complete that 100%, but you want to give a well-rounded experience there.
And that's just my opinion, based on seeing both children and adults, and have working with people over 15, 20 years, because I've had some people that we've worked with on and off. Where I've started working with them, they're 5 or 6, through our children's program, and then we start seeing them come through in transition when they're 16, 17, and then I might work with them again in their mid-20s or early 30s. And so we do get to, that's probably one of the unique things with our program, is that the professionals we have working with us get to see people through their development as children going into adulthood and then working as adults. And so we're going to see issues that that K through 12 teachers aren't going to see, or that a college professor is not going to see, or that our employer is going to see, but because we've seen that entire progression.
Yeah.
And our goal is to make people more functional, is to help people overcome whatever their limitations are so that they can do what they want to be able to do.
Do you notice that those are kind of 3 to 4 points for you, points of contact? And you mentioned like 5 or 6, and then school, and then transition out. Are those pretty consistent there, where you'll serve an individual over their lifespan?
It can be. Each program has different eligibility.
Yeah.
And so we'll work with a student who would be enrolled in our children's program, for example, who's in K through 12, if they're eligible for services from the children's program. If that child is then eligible for vocational rehab services, we'll start working with them. If we get a referral from the VR program. And then there's also the independent living program. So depending on what their specific needs are, what their disability is, they may be working with all 3 of those programs, and we may touch on their case and help them with different needs through all 3 of those programs.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that you guys can be with that individual and serve them over the lifespan there, the full course.
I think it makes a huge difference.
I think it does too, the continuation there for the individual. And now, we are in Homewood, Alabama, but are there other locations? Does someone have to drive here to Birmingham to be able to receive these services, or are there other locations that around the state?
Okay, yeah, we have staff located in Huntsville, Tuscaloosa, in the Birmingham area, Anniston, Montgomery, Dothan, and Mobile. We only have assistive technology services, an AT specialist in Huntsville and in Montgomery.
Okay.
So we only have those two locations for that. The way we provide services, we go out and see people wherever they're located, wherever's most comfortable for them. Mm-hmm. So we're really, as a rule, we don't have a clinical model where someone comes into the office and we do a bunch of evaluations. So, and that makes sense. So if there's a student who needs some issues or needs some assistance, we want to go see them at school, talk with the teacher, teacher's aide, whomever. If they're homeschooled, we want to see them at home. We want to see what technology they're already using. So we want to have an idea of what's in the environment. Of course, for someone who needs vocational assistance, we've got to go out and see them working. We'd like to talk with a coworker or supervisor, someone who knows that job, and actually see that person trying to perform their job or performing their job, mm-hmm. and talk about different ways that they can do that. And of course, for independent living, we've got to go out and take a look at someone's front door if it's not wide enough, or if they need a wheelchair ramp or bathroom modifications. We can do we've tried to do that remotely, and it doesn't work very well. So
yeah,
we can help a little bit with small things, but for the most part, most of our services are out in the field in terms of the evaluation aspect.
Now, you mentioned that you've tried to do some virtual stuff with the home renovations. It's been a little bit tricky. I'd like to ask about the last year during this pandemic, when it's been hard to go and visit people, and how it's kind of worked for you guys.
Yeah. Well, we viewed this as an opportunity. As scary as everything was back in March 2020, this gave us an opportunity to really evaluate what we're doing and why we're doing the way we're doing things, and also take a look at some of the new technologies. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that all of our staff do, we adapt. We help people adapt to their environment, to their situation, to things that have changed. So if someone's in a car wreck and they have a new disability, we help that person adapt. And so that's exactly what we did, is we took a look at what technologies we already have access to. I talked with people who do the same thing in other states and with other organizations. I have a friend professional friend that I know who works for Walter Reed Medical Center, and they actually started doing remote assistive technologies back in mid-2019.
Okay.
As a result of some personnel changes that they had up there. And so I tried to find some people around the country who were already doing that to get a good idea. Mm-hmm. And so by the beginning of April, we knew who had already been working with it. We knew how they were doing things. We had found out about what pitfalls, what issues that they had found. And we started being able to roll out our own remote assistive technology services. So we were able to continue, like, all the education related stuff, all the support, and especially training. I haven't touched on training, but that's a big part of some of the services that we provide, especially for students.
Yeah, you can't just give them a piece of equipment. I can't just receive a piece of equipment and know what to do.
Generally, no. If it was something you could just press an on button and it would work, it'd be an appliance. You know? So most tools need some level of training, and some things you just need to sit down and show someone how to use once. Sometimes it takes multiple trainings if it's advanced technology, mm-hmm. or if the person has a brain injury or cognitive impairment, they might require repeated trainings. So we figured out how to do that, and use document cameras, or use an iPhone as a document camera to demonstrate, like, how a smart pen works, for example, which is a note-taking aid. And so by mid-April, we were fully open for business.
That's amazing, because a lot of times organizations that I spoke with are just seeing the community. It's taken a while. It kind of got hit in the face when the pandemic happened, and scrambling around. But you guys took the opportunity to reach out to others in the field, and, like you said, adapt yourselves as a program. Mm-hmm. And a month and a half later, you guys are right back up and running there. Yeah. Did you notice that there were new solutions because of the pandemic that needed to be solved, new challenges that kids were facing with online learning or anything like that that really popped up for you?
Yeah, there certainly were some big changes for students especially. Now, we do work with students already who homeschool, and so we are familiar with the technologies that they use. And so I know that was an issue for students who are used to going to in-room in class. So we're able to apply some of that knowledge and show them how to do that. A lot of the technologies that we use, especially for like note-taking, do have remote components to them, and it's just a matter of teaching people how to use something that they're already using in a different way. But say a lot of K through 12 might already be using Notability, for example, is a common app used in education for note-taking and distributing educational materials. And so if you'd been using that in the classroom, there's some differences to using it remotely, but we can help people work through that, and especially use some of the built-in assistive technology that's on the devices that they're already using to aid them with remote
So it did kind
classes.
it wasn't that it was something new, you just got more of that remote learning stuff.
Yeah, it's just a matter, it's changing how you're using existing tools.
Yeah.
So that I don't know if they're, you know, technology is not just a device or a piece of software, it's also how you use things that are around you. And so you can require an assistive technology specialist or an evaluation for assistive technology without ever needing actually a new device. It might be that you need to learn a different way of using it or see a new way of using a device. So a very common example of that is people who are experiencing vision loss need to be taught how to use their smartphone with some of the built-in technology that's available.
Larger font,
Yeah.
and those types of things.
You don't need to go out and buy a brand new giant phone.
Yeah.
It might be some changes in a new way of using their existing technology is all they really need. But it's just as critical.
Yeah.
You know, it's just as critical as a new device is knowing how to use what you've got.
I have that with my grandmother, and I make her emails huge. And then her Outlook, I blow them up for her.
Yeah.
We have a question here from Alabama Lifespan Respite. Do you have to be an ADRS client to receive RE and AT services? If so, who is eligible and how do you apply?
Okay. So, yes, you do need to be enrolled in one of the programs for the agency. Each program has its own eligibility. And so I can't answer that question directly. It's going to depend on the age of the individual and what their disability is. Typically, we can find some program within the agency that they're going to fit into. Even like our community support specialist program, which is part of the SAIL program, can pick up a lot of individuals who might not be eligible for any of the other programs. And then they would be eligible for an evaluation and training. And I do want to note that our program does not pay for devices itself. We work with people, we recommend devices, and some other program has to pay for it, or individuals will pay for it as well.
Yeah.
But we are there to provide the evaluation, we can make people aware of what's available, and we can provide training.
So you do need to be able to receive services and qualify to receive services through ADRS, through one of their programs.
Yes.
And then, we'll be referred to you guys, and you guys will take on that individual.
Yes.
But as far as now, there will be no cost to the individual if they're receiving services through ADRS.
Not from us.
And except if they're another program won't pick up the cost of the device, then it could be out of pocket.
Yeah, if there's no, if someone needs, say a common thing is a wheelchair ramp that someone might need. Those can be pretty expensive to go out and purchase. And so
I'm unfamiliar with how much ballpark those would be.
It depends on the size.
Yeah.
And so you're probably looking at maybe $100 to $150. I haven't priced wood, recently.
Yeah, I've
That's
heard
the
it's
thing.
way up recently.
It's gone.
Actually.
Yeah, I've seen like seen estimates is 4 times the cost.
Yeah.
Before the pandemic, we'd be looking like at $100 to maybe $120 a linear foot for a ramp as an estimate. That price has probably gone way up. But to go back to our example of like how, even though we can't pay for the ramp, if they had enrolled with our independent living program, we can do the ramp evaluation. We can tell them exactly what they need, show them pictures and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes our independent living program can find an outside funding source, like different benevolent funds, for example, that would provide funding for the materials to build the ramp. And so we can be creative sometimes in finding solutions for people. But a lot of the technology we recommend really isn't all that expensive in terms, it might be a couple $100, but it's not super, we're not talking about a $10,000
new computer
braille display or something, yeah.
Yeah. Now, in the case of the wheelchair ramp, would you guys actually be building that or just handing over the designs for somebody to build?
We hand the design over.
Yeah. So I wasn't sure how that worked.
Yeah, it's hard to find people within the state. And our independent living program has a coordinator who helps find volunteer labor to build ramps, or will coordinate with churches and Boy Scout groups and just different groups of individuals who are interested in helping to build a ramp or two.
We had the opportunity to be with SAIL for a broadcast, and they were mentioning they had quite a list of volunteers and community organizations that were more than willing to help out, and they are always open to, if you know a good organization or your church is looking to give back in any way, please reach out to the SAIL program at ADRS. They are always open to having additional volunteers there. So we kind of went through a few of my talking points here. Cost the individual, age group served. So really you can start off at kindergarten and go all the way through.
Well, we can start working with children at birth if necessary. To tell you the truth, we haven't had referrals really from people who are under age 2 or 3. That's pretty rare. I think in maybe 20 years I maybe have seen maybe 3 kids under the age of 3 for things. So that's not very common.
What would be an example like that?
Usually it's related to something they need around the house for their parents to help care for them.
Like, I'm trying to think of what something specific would be there for an infant.
Yeah, that's why we don't get very many referrals.
But we do have quite a bit of devices that we looked at yesterday, or 2 days ago on Monday, and Clifton was able to put those into a video for us. So actually what we'll do now is we'll go to that video and we'll kind of show you behind the scenes of what Mr. Papp and his team do here at ADRS, and you get to see some of the lab work. I think it's just awesome. It reminds me of being able to tinker on stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and put the cameras on silent mode here, and then we'll go to the video. And Mr. Papp, you and I can walk over to the computer here.
So earlier we were talking about off-the-shelf technologies and software, but one of the things our engineering staff does is we do custom design things as needed. And I know you had asked me on Monday how often we do this, and I would probably say handful times a month we will have someone we can't find something that we can just purchase that's going to meet their needs. And so we have a variety of tools throughout the state to enable us to either modify or make modifications for a piece of technology.
Now, what exactly is this that we're looking at here?
Okay, and so we're looking at a 3D printer, and this is the first one that we had. This is actually located at the Homewood office. We purchased that back in 2016, and since then we have purchased one for most of our offices. It enables us to make custom technology, or to make a part to modify another piece of technology. And so what's currently printing is a customized stylus. It happens to be made out of a special plastic that is conductive. so that it's child size. It's very small, but it's designed for a child to be able to access an iPad to use as a communication device.
Okay. So the screen will pick it up there with that material, the touching of it.
Yes. Well, yeah, we add a little bit of conductive foam to it as well. So.
And on the right here, I thought this was really cool. I'd ask about it. On the right side of your screen, you'll see some tubes coming in to the 3D printer. And Mr. Papp said, if you could kind of walk through that.
Yeah, so this is like a very fancy hot glue gun, basically, is that there is a filament of plastic that has a fairly low melting point that is fed up into the machine, and there's pulleys and gears and whatnot that control how that plastic is forced into a hot end that's like the tip of a hot glue gun, and it's forced through at a very specific rate, and the printer moves around and it deposits that melted plastic in layer after layer after layer on a table. And after, I think this particular print may be an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. But after 2 hours, when the print is done, you will have a completed part. And this happens to be a T-Stylus.
And I was surprised how quick you guys could get it done. I thought it was going to be an overnight thing for something at this size. But, you said an hour, 2 hours at the most.
Yes. There are some things that take a long time. And we've tried doing, say, key guards, which is a plastic cover that would fit over a device. Those actually take a very long time to print. And so, yeah, what you have on the screen. Well,
I'm going to go back here so you guys can see the stylus here that you would hold at the bottom right of what's being built. You would hold that in your hand kind of through a few different fingers there.
Yes.
And then next year we're going to get to a little bit of behind the scenes and what software Mr. Papp and his team use.
Yeah. And so the particular program that's there is called TinkerCAD. It's a free program. It's very simple to use. It's one of our tools, just one tool we use for designing stuff for the 3D printer. But it's a very simple little program. In fact, I've worked with some of the kids that we've worked with on computer access. I've been able to open this program up where they can design stuff and they can create little solid models.
That's got to be awesome to be able to just tinker with something and then send it over.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry I didn't show this. I had this out when you guys came and I didn't show it to you. We didn't talk about it. But I had a little girl who was about 9 years old actually design her own little joystick handle with this.
For her wheelchair.
For her wheelchair. Now it wasn't an accommodation. It wasn't particularly unique, but it was bright pink.
Yeah.
And had stars on it. So it was really cool to see a child of that age to be able to use a very basic tool like this with assistive technology to design a part that I was able then to combine and put together into a solid model that we could actually print.
I mean, and that's customizing your environment, and I do that with stuff in my car. So to be able to do that for her wheelchair, I'm sure she really enjoyed that.
Yeah, yeah.
So she went through here and she made her own
little joystick handle. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yep.
And then the next scene that we're going to see here are some solutions.
Actually, there's the joystick handle in the front. I think it looks red in this picture.
This one here?
Yes, yes.
So you can see it. Yeah, the red pinkish here where you can see the star on top of it. That was something that a 9-year-old girl made in this software that we were just showing, made in this software, and sent it over to Mr. Papp. Mr. Papp was able to put it into the 3D printer we saw here, print that out for her, and she got, looks a little bit red as Mr. Papp said here on the screen, but it is pink and it has a little star on top, and that's her joystick for her wheelchair.
And we can print as many of them as we want, so that's why I have that one. She has one, and
so maybe she'll start up like a little side business, and then she'll be like, "Well, I can get Mr. Papp to print these out.
Yeah,
it's $1.50 a piece or something." Okay, let's see what else we have here, and I'm going to let it play for a little bit. But everything on the screen here you can see came through, not everything, but a majority of it came through the 3D printer. If you could talk a little bit about this one.
Okay, so yeah, there's a couple of Echo dot holders
Let me go
in
back.
there. Yeah, and so that happens to be an Auburn one for an Auburn fan.
Now, what is an Echo Dot?
Okay, so Echo Dot is, most people have heard of Alexa and they're familiar with that. Echo Dot was the least expensive version of that. And we have a lot of people who use the Echo devices, who use Alexa to control their house. Another change you had talked about when I started, an environmental control system to allow someone to turn their lights on and off and change the thermostat and all that, was upwards of $20,000 to $30,000. This was back in 1999. So with the Amazon Alexa and the Internet of Things types devices like Philips Hue light bulbs and Honeywell thermostats, Nest thermostats, you can modify somebody's house for typically under $2,000, excluding a door opener. So the Echo Dot is a very common and inexpensive way for people to control that. But for some of the people that we work with, they have very poor breath support or their voice is very soft, and the device and the Echo has to be positioned very precisely for them. And so this happens to be an Auburn University themed wall mount for somebody, so we can mount that to the wall next to their bed, and it points the Echo Dot microphones towards the person, and so they don't need to have it on a shelf or have to have some strange support for it, so that they can access and talk to the Echo Dot, get it to turn things on and off, read them books, play audio, control their TV, whatever they're using it for.
So you guys were building smart homes back in 1999.
That technology's been out for a really long time.
Really?
Yeah. You've seen James Bond, right?
I thought those were all made up.
No, that technology's been, now it used to be super expensive, but nowadays, for $1,000, anyone can control their whole living room and control their TV and all that with voice control. It's really amazing.
That's kind of what happens if it goes haywire. I always think but then you see in the James Bond 2 where there's a villain. Maybe the villain is a smart house eventually.
Well, if you avoid the sharks with lasers on their heads, maybe you won't have a problem. Yeah.
Here we have the joystick that Mr. Papp was talking about, custom made by a 9-year-old girl, and I'm sure she's loving that. So it looks pretty like you can get a good grip on it. It's not too smooth, but you can kind of really clench onto that thing there.
Yeah. The key with this is that's something that she designed for herself, and I would never design something like that. But she was able to use it, and that was her design, and she made it herself, and it's on her wheelchair, and she can show everybody something that she made.
Now, did you have to go and teach her how to use the software, or was it pretty, you just sent it over to her?
I was working with her.
Okay.
Because she was not able to access a computer system, and she, due to her disability, she was no longer able to use crayons or to draw or anything independently. And so I was working with her on computer access, and we had figured out what technology that she needed to be able to operate a computer and move the mouse around. And we had opened up Paint so she could start to draw a picture, because that's something that she had said, I haven't been able to draw a picture like in 2 years. And so we got her using Paint, which is just your basic, it's a basic program on Windows. Most people have used it. And she mastered that in about 2 seconds. And so I was thinking, let me show you this. Let me show you this program. And so I opened up TinkerCAD and did a real brief, she gave me about 30 seconds to show her how to use it. And then she took it over and immediately started making stuff. She had created that, and I said, well, we could make that a joystick if you would like. And she said, yep. And so that's how we got to that point.
Yeah, that's really cool. And to, I normally I would think of just drawing like a 2D thing, but to have the 3D in there, and for her to be able to go through that, she's a lot smarter than I am on the computer, I'll tell you that much. Take us through this a little bit. And this, I would like you to talk about the width that we talked about right here, the cross section there.
Okay, so yeah, the 3D printer, the way it makes a three-dimensional part is that it infills. You can kind of see that cross section kind of looks like maybe cardboard or something in there. but it doesn't print something that's solid. Whatever we print is hollow. We can control how hollow it is. We can make it more so or less so. I think this is what they would call 20% infill. But for some of the things that we make, say like a custom stylus, we might make it, say 60 or 70% infill if we want it to be a lot heavier, or we might want something lighter. And so one of the things that we do make is a ball style stylus for the iPad, which has a ball on the end, and then it would be like if you poked a pencil into a tennis ball, kind of that sort of thing. But these are conductive, and we can control the weight and the diameters and the sizes based on someone's personal needs.
Now, would you say that the more saturation there, the more sturdy the piece of equipment is?
Not necessarily. The one thing to remember with the 3D printer is that the parts are not as strong as something that's molded out of plastic. It's more like maybe balsa wood in terms of its strength. It can delaminate, or it can crack along the lines. So if you go back a little bit, you can, and to see the profile. Yeah, okay, so you see how there's lines? You see those lines?
Yeah.
Those are the layers.
Okay.
And so certain parts, depending on their design, can fracture along those lines. And so it's a 3D printed part is not necessarily as strong as something that you can just buy off the shelf that's been molded out of plastic.
Will it ever be, we keep hearing 3D printed like houses or 3D printed stuff for cars. Do you think it ever will be that way?
Yeah, there's different types of 3D printing technology.
Okay.
And so NASA has metal 3D printers that they're printing customized parts out of titanium, and those are going to be just as strong as a regular part. These are consumer grade printers, and they're still over $1,000, but they're considered consumer grade printers, and they only print in plastic, and they only print by layer. So this particular type of technology, while it's affordable for us, if we need something that's really going to be durable, we can't just print it out of that.
Yeah.
Or you have to be very careful with how it's designed. And so that's one of the things I noticed with Stylus when we first started printing those, is it really depended on the orientation. There's a lot of engineering stuff that goes into figuring out how to print it so it doesn't break too easily.
Yeah. Figuring out, I'm sure you've probably been through a few molds when trying to test those in the end product.
Yeah, we've broken a lot of stuff.
That's engineering, that's tinkering.
That's it, yes. Well, we had to learn how to use it, so.
Yes.
So yeah.
Now let's go to this. This is something that you guys designed for cup holding. Let me backtrack here. And if you could give us a little bit of background about who this might be for.
Okay, and so, yeah, that particular cup doesn't fit that cup holder, but we have made by hand in our shop cup holders for people that will fit their specific cup that they like to use. If they have issues with gripping, in this example, you're kind of holding it like you would a coffee mug, but those cup holders are designed as more of a cuff, and you would slide your hand between the handle and the object or the cup that you're trying to pick up. And I think this one is sized for the small Yeti type cup, but it's sized for a particular hand size, so that individual can slide their hand between the cup and there, and they don't have to have a grip, a pinch grip, or have a grip with their hand. As long as they can support their wrist, they can use that to get a drink.
Yeah, kind of like a mug in there. You kind of put it in there, and so let me do this. You kind of just slip your hand in there, and then it'll sit right up against that mug, and you don't have to grip, as Mr. Papp was saying. You don't have to grip all the way around that, but you can just kind of sit in there, and then as you drink, it would be kind of like this.
Yeah, if the cup was the right size, that handle would be all the way closer to the top. Yeah.
Okay, if you could introduce this gizmo here. What's the correct word? Is it gizmo, gadget, tinker toy?
Yeah, I don't know. This happens to be an example of a switch mount. And one of the things we do with 3D printing is we will combine stuff that we have printed with off-the-shelf components and hardware. And so in this particular example, this is a switch holder designed for a wheelchair. And the green part is a clamp that will go, it can clamp onto a wheelchair, round tubing, 1-inch diameter. And then it is attached to some materials we got from a hardware store. It's called lock line tubing, and it's adjustable and bendy. So we did not print that, but that's from a hardware store. And then on the very end, the black part is a switch mount that you can attach an ability switch to, like a jelly bean switch, for example.
Oh, what is a jelly bean switch? I've never heard that word before.
Well, it's a brand name. So
okay.
it's a 2-inch diameter switch with a large plastic cap that a child or an adult can operate without having to extend a finger. They can bump it with their back of their hand or their elbow or their head.
Okay, so here we're going to get into a little bit of the jelly bean
What the switch looks like, yeah.
And
so,
this is a great, I love how you're going through a specific example here, because I think it's sometimes hard to anchor what it would be used for.
yeah, and so in this example, working with a child who's just learning how to use a switch, what we call cause and effect, is they learn you can hit a button and have it do something. This is an adapted toy. And so one of our engineers, Ashley McElroy, actually just adapted this. That's why it was sitting down there. And she was able to open up the controller for the toy and add some additional wires and a jack that blue switch can plug into. And so when a child hits that blue switch, the toy will start operating. And so for a child with a significant disability who might be using their head to hit the switch is what that mount would be used for. So that's that.
So there you can see the blue switch is going to be put on the end of...
On that black plate.
Yep, the black plate right here at the bottom.
Yes.
And then it's been programmed or linked into. So it would just sit just like that.
And it would attach to a child's wheelchair. Yep.
And the green part would attach to a child's wheelchair. And then they could use any part of their body to go ahead and hit that big blue button. And it would activate the toy at that point. And realistically, you could send that to anything.
Yes, anything that we can adapt with the switch. It could be a door opener. It could be an emergency call system. It could be a toy. There's any number of things that can be adapted with a switch like that.
I like the emergency call system. So if someone is sitting in a wheelchair and doesn't have access to a phone at that point, they can just kind of lean into that button, and you guys could have it triggered the local police or fire department or...
Yeah. It would be like a Lifeline. I can't remember what
the
brand name. Yeah.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. And there were just a huge amount of cool little gadgets down there.
And so, yes, and so this is an example of another combination of a 3D printed part and some off-the-shelf type stuff. And so what this is it's a phone holder. Again, this could be mounted to a table or to someone's wheelchair, depending on the bracket that goes on the end. This particular one, I know we can't see it in this shot, is attached to a spring clamp from Harbor Freight. And so we've got a spring clamp holding it on the table, and then we've got our lock line tubing again, and then we have a custom 3D printed phone holder that's adjustable. And so this could be mounted to someone's bedside if they needed to have their phone in easy reach and position so that they can operate it while they're in bed. It could have a different mounting part on it that would attach it to a wheelchair. It could be attached to a table, like in this example.
Really could put this anywhere.
Yeah. It's also very useful for Zoom calls if you're using your phone for Zoom.
Oh, yeah, it's a great idea. I like how you guys will 3D print part of it, but you'll also use utility or stuff that's already existing. So you're not trying to always reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, no, engineers are lazy. We're not going to design anything that we don't have to. So it takes enough time to design some of these parts that if we can find something that's going to meet our needs, that we're going to buy that off the shelf. And like I said, with the 3D printer, the parts aren't super durable necessarily, and we want to limit the amount of parts needed, or we want to make sure that the part is very is very secure. And the other nice thing with the 3D printer that we haven't talked about is that the designs for these parts are often shared.
Oh, yeah.
And so a lot of the things that we've designed or that we have printed, we've either posted our designs on the Thingiverse website, which I don't think I got around to showing that to you. But
That's the real word?
it's called Thingy, like Thingiverse. And it's one of the 3D printer manufacturers put that website up. But we've posted some of our Stylus and various other things to that website.
That's really cool that people will share those types of resources. I took a few classes at Arizona State University, and one of the things that I did there was help transcribe books for people that visually impaired.
Yeah.
So we had to go through and do some of like the pictures and describing pictures like that. It always was very frustrating to me that like University of Texas was doing the same thing and we weren't sharing. Or furthermore, like if you had somebody that you thought transcribed part of that book for you very well, could you ask for them to transcribe other books for you? And there wasn't any longevity like that. It's very frustrating. But to hear that you guys are sharing plans and not reinventing the wheel, I think is really cool there.
Yes, I think it's very important to be able to do that sort of thing.
Okay, I'm going to let this play a little bit. And here we're going to be talking, where the difference here is the phone holder, and then we're going to go to an iPad.
It's a tablet holder, and that's completely off-the-shelf parts. So anyway, yeah. Did you want to go back to that? Or
Yep.
There's not much to say there. I mean, that's off-the-shelf parts from one of our assistive technology companies. And so that's just an example of a commercially available phone holder, or I'm sorry, tablet holder.
And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to bring up, maybe I can do two like this, and we're going to try, can I put, it's this one? I want the video and then 3. So if we go like this, and guys, we're doing this on the fly. Let's see if we can, I want to reposition. We'll position, can I click on this one? Yes, I can. And we will zoom in. And we're going to make this like this. That should be good. And then I got to go to position on the other one. Overlay 2. Or no, let's go to main. No. It's got to be overlay 2, right? There we go. And we'll put us down in the corner and we'll just kind of go like that. Now that you guys can see what we're seeing. Okay, cool.
Okay, yeah, and that's an adjustable tablet holder. And again, it can mount to a table like it is here, or someone's wheelchair, or to a bedside, or a desk for a student, for example.
And let's go on to the next one here. This one was really cool, and I like this because it wasn't like super high tech, but it made sense, and it was the solution to a problem there.
Yeah, so a lot of the things that we end up making in our workshop are pretty basic. It's just combining technology in a different way, or this is kind of based off of a pricing gun kind of idea. If you know, when I was in high school, I worked in a store, and back then we had pricing guns and we had to price everything. So, and so what this is it's a label peeler. This was developed for someone in one of our supported employment programs, and they had a job where they were supposed to peel a label off this really huge roll of labels and put it on a bag of food that they had packaged. And so the individual had a variety of different functional limitations, including difficulty with dexterity. They weren't able to peel the labels off this roll very easily. It was taking too long. And so we developed, this is a prototype. We ended up building a bunch of these for them. But this enables the person to just pull on the edge of the paper, and it will automatically peel the label off for them. So it's very fast, very easy to use.
Yeah, I can imagine a lot of people would want to use this.
Yeah.
I would, yeah. If I had that job, it would make my job so much easier.
Yeah. Oh, tell us about this one, because this one's also kind of, I'll say, a low-tech solution, but it works.
Yeah, again, like I said, we're just using real simple ideas. This happened to be designed for a woman who, she was an accountant, and she had had a CVA stroke where that resulted in hemiparesis, where she could really only use one hand. And the way her department was keeping paperwork is they were rubber banding stacks together once they were completed. And rubber banding with one hand is next to impossible. It's I couldn't do it one-handed. So what this is again is a prototype that we had built just to make sure it would work before we made a nice one. And this is a rubber banding jig, and so she can, with one hand.
And I like how you're going through this. You're doing it with one hand to show there.
It's critical. We have to simulate everything, and so if whatever the functional limitation is of somebody, when we're developing a product, we're going to test it with that, using that same functional limitation. So anyway, this just allowed her to, with one hand, put a rubber band on. Onto the jig, and then put all of her paperwork in there, and then she was just very easily able to rubber band the stuff together. Very simple solution. Again, it's not a commercially available product, and it's designed specifically for her particular situation.
Now, do you know if she's still using that?
Honestly, I don't. This would have been a VR consumer, and once we accommodate the job, vocational rehab will close them out.
Okay, yeah. So you don't have too much direct contact after the solution's been provided, unless they come back, but...
Yeah, if we didn't do our job right, they come back and we find out about it. So.
I thought this one was really cool. This one reminded me of woodworking, where you're going over like a bandsaw, but it was not for cutting. Is also, or actually for packaging.
Yeah, and so this is a packing tape table prototype that we developed for somebody, and this particular individual that this was made for had some dexterity and coordination issues, and low vision as well. And so he was working in a shipping receiving department and was supposed to be taping packages that were going out, and was having a lot of difficulty. The package. The tape job was not up to standards. It was pretty messy. The tape was all wrinkled and everything. And so we had gone in to take a look at what was going on with him, and determined that the issue he was having was trying to hold and move the box with his left hand in one direction and move the packing tape gun in the another direction with his right hand. His coordination problem. And so what we did is we developed this fixture to hold the packing tape. There's a fence that is adjustable.
I just see Mr. Papp kind of lift up the fence, the backside there.
You can,
you can change it for the width of the packaging.
Based on the width of the box. You can set that. And these were all small boxes. They weren't very big, so we got lucky with that. If it was a large box, we would have had to do something different. But the reason why we go out into the field to see things is we need to know what's out in the environment. And if he was doing larger boxes, we would have had a different solution. But what this allows him to do is he can set the fence based on the width of the box, and then put the tape he can hold the tape against the box, and then all he has to do is slide the box to the left, and it will tape it up. And we'll just see a quick demonstration.
So I want this at home. If I was going to be doing a lot of packaging and taping, I would want this for like Christmas, birthdays, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's an example. A lot of accommodations, and this is something we talked about earlier, things like curb cuts and stuff in the built environment. But an accommodation like this is something that a manufacturing facility or shipping receiving department could use for all of its staff.
Yeah.
Because again, I worked in a factory in shipping and receiving, and I know the forever saga of trying to find the tape gun, because there was only 2 tape guns and they were always missing. So this one solves that issue, in that the tape is always in the same place on the table.
It just makes it a lot cleaner.
And it's a lot faster, and you have a very consistent job with that. So yeah, that's certainly something that would improve production, not only for the person with a disability, but for everyone else in that business.
If the person that needed this solution was working at a factory that I was managing or something, I would say, you know what, that's awesome. Thank you for bringing in that solution. Would you please ask Mr. Papp to build 10 more of those?
Yeah. My understanding is they had planned to install those on their shipping and receiving tables.
Yeah, I imagine that they probably would there. And this one I thought was really cool because I've heard of, I have a family member and some people said that she could get a job, and some of that could be shredding. And so I've heard shredding before, but I always thought for her, like she can't do it. She would just tear it up, but she wouldn't be able to put it in the shredder there. So
yeah, and so this is an example of an adapted paper shredder, and this was made for somebody who had pretty significant cerebral palsy and had very limited. He was in a wheelchair, had very limited use of his hands. And so we were able to adapt the controls so that he could forward and reverse with a closed fist. That's that silver lever on the back.
Yeah, if you see it right up top where Mr. Papp's hand is, instead of having some small buttons there, you can just kind of touch that lever. There you go, you saw it.
And then there's also a guide system that's mounted to the top of the shredder that will allow somebody with who doesn't have good dexterity to place the paper on the guide and then just slide it in with a closed fist.
So sometimes it's not these grandiose designs that take months and solutions. It can be fairly simple.
Yeah, most of the stuff that we are able to complete in our shop is going to be something very simple like this, but they're critical. I don't want to confuse how easy it looks or how simple it is with how important it is to somebody.
The impact it can have.
It has a huge impact to somebody, and if we don't have, without a shop, you can't do stuff like this. It's like without the 3D printer, there's a lot of very simple things we do with the 3D printer that would just be out of reach without having access to that tool. So.
This next one I really like, and if you could give a little bit of background, because I think you touched on it, but reaching out to schools, high schools and colleges, and enrolling their engineers or future engineers.
Yeah, and so, I'm in a profession called rehabilitation engineering, which I'd never heard of until I was recruited to go to a program on rehab engineering when I was in college. And I find the same is true with a lot of the engineering students that we work with and try and recruit to work here at the agency. And so one of the things our program has done to aid in recruiting, not just for ourselves, but to also make engineers know that this is an option, is that we do work with both the university engineering programs and with high school pre-engineering programs to, one, teach them a little bit about rehab engineering to give them a background. And for students who are interested, we have project lists for things that we've been asked for and we don't have time to complete, or whatever else is going on, or things that keep coming up. And so this happens to have been developed by some students at one of the engineering programs to aid with another program at our agency called Project Search, which works with students who are in transition and trying to learn some job skills.
See, I think that's great because you guys are giving back to the community and allowing for opportunity to explore these things. And also with the introduction of that, I don't think a lot of students would be thinking about these types of designs if they hadn't had contact with it.
Exactly. And so what this does is we will give them a problem and we'll talk about what the issue is. And then, for example, one of the common issues we find for people who are working on janitorial skill building is that they may have limited or no use of one of their hands, and which is a problem for mopping and sweeping, and we can adapt a mop with special hand grips and whatnot. But wringing out a full-size 20-pound mop with one hand is also very tricky. You kind of have to balance it on your shoulder or grip it between your head and your neck. And so what this is a prototype looking at a way that someone can have a foot control that will enable them to wring a mop out with one-handed use.
I like the whole process there from, enrolling the community at large, all the way down to the solutions that are being provided here.
Well, and see, another benefit that might not be readily apparent is that all the engineering students that we've worked with or talked with, when they go off, if they don't become rehab engineers, and most of them won't, but they're going to go off and design and work for someone doing designs. And when they do that, they're going to remember the folks with disabilities.
Yeah.
And that's my hope, is that if they go to work for a mop bucket manufacturer, who of course they do employ engineers, that when they're working on these new products, that they think about, okay, how is someone going to use this with one hand?
Yeah.
You go into a bathroom, and a lot of these paper towel dispensers require two-handed use. How does someone with one hand use that? If that had been thought about by the engineer who designed that, they would have never designed it for two-handed use.
Yeah.
And so the 3 or 4 students who worked on this, when they have graduated college and they've gotten their first jobs designing stuff, it is my hope that they carry this experience forward
that
with
should
them.
be a required class for college engineering students. Adaptive.
Yeah.
Is something along those lines.
Yeah. It would be nice, but we work with what we have,
Yes. And then here, kind of the last bit of the video that Clifton has made, we're going to kind of see behind the scenes in some of the lab.
Yes, and so this is our workshop area, and we're able to, in most of our offices, make things out of wood and plastic and light metals. And so this is a basic workspace that we have. Most of the things that you saw earlier were made in that area.
I feel like I would just get lost. I don't know how to use all of these tools here, but I feel like after a month, I would just be tinkering down there. Don't touch me. I'm working.
Yeah.
Cooking up some cool solutions here. Well, I'd like to thank Mr. Papp and Clifton for making this video, and I'm going to have Clifton switch back to our dual camera view and just have about 1 or 2 more questions for you, Mr.
Okay, certainly.
Let's get energized next door. Excuse me. And, okay, we got both up on screen. How it goes on. And kind of the last thing we touched on there with reaching out to the younger engineers coming up, but designing for society at large, the universal design versus the 5%, and what you guys really focus on there.
Yeah.
But the ideas behind that.
Yeah, and so, the concept of universal design, especially for cities and products, is very important. It has made things a lot more accessible for society. Everything from the iPhone to curb cuts, in downtown Birmingham. And that meets the needs of most people. One of the things that our engineers do is help people find accommodations when what's out there doesn't meet their needs. So while we can help people learn how to use, say, like iOS a little bit better and show them some of the stuff that's built in for learning disabilities or built in for vision impairments, there often is a portion of people who it will not meet their needs.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that, like, our workshop exists for, is that you just cannot buy a commercially available product that's going to meet that need. And then we also help people. We had discussed wheelchair ramps, and it's very common. Those are usually built to the maximum allowable slope, which is 1 to 12, which is still pretty 1 to 12, 1 inch of rise to 12 inches of run. That's still very steep for a lot of folks. And so we can help individuals, like at their house, determine, is that an appropriate slope? If you have a young guy who's pushing himself up that ramp, it might not be as much of a problem, or someone who has a power wheelchair. But if you have an elderly caregiver that's pushing someone else up in their wheelchair, that may be too steep for them.
Yeah.
Or for somebody who has a C6 level spinal cord injury who's still using a manual chair, that's probably going to be too steep for them. we can help them figure out what the appropriate accommodation, what that should be.
I feel like you guys are kind of on the forefront of the breaking ground there, that the things that you're designing for the 5% that still need additional accommodations will become universal design in the future at some point.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the things we build one of, or I might build a prototype and then we'll build a final product, but they're so customized because it's very specific to the person's disability and what the task is they're trying to perform in the environment that they're working in.
Yeah.
And so there's some things I've shown, like the one-handed rubber band jig. There's probably other people who can utilize that. But like the label peelers are very customized for that specific situation. And that particular product is a very specific situation.
Yeah.
There's specific roll size and diameter and all that. So the likelihood that we'll ever make another one of those is not very high.
Now, as we kind of close here, I'd like to ask, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think someone listening, whether that's an individual or family member or an organization, could benefit from hearing?
Yeah, one of the things that I think is very important is that for rehab engineering and assistive technology in general is not, it's not an exclusive club in terms of who can provide those services and where you have to go to be able to get them. And so a lot of the stuff that I've shown you, you can look online and see examples of those. I've posted videos of the stuff that you had video of, like on YouTube. You can go to the Thingiverse website or similar websites where people share designs to look at what's out there. But a lot of this stuff is custom made by somebody who has some mechanical ability and they self-accommodate. And we did a training once on how to take common stuff that you might find in your closet or in your kitchen drawer and make assistive technology out of it. And so with a handful of pencils and some rubber bands, for example, I can make a mount or something to position a iPad.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there is expensive AT out there. It's great. It's very useful. It doesn't have to be that way. You don't need to go to an engineer necessarily to get that sort of thing. And I encourage people, if they're having difficulty performing a task or doing something, is to think about different ways that they can do it, because that's usually the first question that I ask for job accommodations is, have you thought of a different way of doing this? What have you tried before, to get an idea kind of where they are in that troubleshooting process, because anyone can troubleshoot and come up with solutions.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Papp, I really appreciate you spending the morning with us and sharing all the great things that you and your team do here at ADRS. And we're going to put a couple of links in the chat, and I might be able to find that YouTube channel and put that in there as some additional video footage. So
Sure.
Well, once again, Mr. Papp, thank you very much. And we'll both kind of look at our respective cameras and say,
All right.
We'll see you guys next time.
Goodbye.